The river did not ask permission before it took her, and daylight did not soften the violence of the current as it flung her against the stones. The scream was swallowed by rushing water, the silk coat dragged under like a promise broken, and in that instant the world narrowed to breath and panic and a pair of hands that appeared from nowhere, strong and shaking, pulling her back from the mouth of the river as if the day itself had decided she was not done yet. If you believe in kindness and second chances, take a moment right now to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel Shadowverse, because stories like this live on that belief and grow stronger when shared. His name was Armin Qureshi, and he had been counting the hours until he could pick up his son from school, the way single parents learn to count everything. The river cut through the city like a careless thought, loud and glittering in the noon sun, and Armin had taken the long way home on foot because walking helped him breathe. When he heard the sound that wasn't water, he dropped his grocery bag without thinking. Milk burst open on the pavement. Apples rolled toward the curb. He didn't remember choosing to run. He remembered only the cold slicing his shins as he waded in, the weight of another human being suddenly real in his arms, the slick terror of losing footing, and then the moment his boots found a rock and held. They lay on the bank afterward, the river hissing its disappointment behind them, the sun cruelly bright above. The woman coughed and shook, hair plastered to her face, eyes wide as if she had fallen through a crack in the day. Armin shrugged off his jacket and wrapped it around her because that was what you did, because his son had once asked him why heroes always gave away their coats and Armin had said it was to keep someone else warm when the world went cold. He kept his distance, hands raised in apology for the intimacy of rescue, while she gathered herself like a person reassembling a shattered mirror. Her name, he would later learn, was Zara Kaleem. In the city she was known for glass offices and quarterly calls, for the calm voice that moved markets and the sharp mind that cut through rooms. On the bank of the river, she was simply a woman who had slipped on a wet stone while trying to answer an email she should never have opened, a woman who had learned how thin success feels when water fills your lungs. She sat up, shivering, and her gaze followed Armin as he turned away to give her space, eyes catching on the faded seams of his shirt, the mud on his trousers, the tremor in his hands that came after courage has been spent. They didn't speak much, because shock is a language all its own. He flagged down help with the steadiness of someone practiced at emergencies, the kind that come with childhood fevers and broken appliances and a life stitched together without backup. When the ambulance arrived, Zara insisted on knowing his name and pressing his jacket back into his hands, insisting he take her card, insisting because control was her lifeline and gratitude made her dizzy. Armin nodded, said it was nothing, said people should look out for each other, and left before the city could turn him into a story. Days passed, bright and ordinary, the way days do after something extraordinary refuses to follow you home. Armin went back to work at the small print shop where the machines hummed like tired insects. He packed lunches, signed permission slips, washed mud from his boots. His son, Sammy, asked why his jacket smelled like the river. Armin laughed and said sometimes the day leaves a mark. He did not call the number on the card. He did not imagine glass offices or gratitude turning into opportunity. He had learned not to build castles out of what-ifs. Zara did imagine him. She imagined the quiet way he had turned his back, the absence of expectation in his help. She imagined the way the city had kept moving while she lay on the bank, a reminder that power is loud only until it isn't. She returned to her office wrapped in sympathy and caution, in meetings that replayed the near miss as a headline that never happened. At night, the river returned in her dreams, and with it the question of who she was without the armor of titles. She held the card until the edges softened, then finally called. When they met again, it was daylight and a public cafe with windows open to the street. He came in smelling of ink and paper, apologetic for being late because a machine jammed and he couldn't leave it crying. She stood when he arrived and then laughed at herself, a small crack in the posture she wore like a second skin. Gratitude sat between them, awkward and sincere. She spoke of the river. He spoke of his son. They did not speak of money or favors. The city pressed in, curious and indifferent. Zara offered help anyway, because offering was how she moved through the world. Armin refused gently, because refusal was how he kept his balance. Their conversations became a bridge, narrow and surprising, built of small truths. She learned about evenings spent helping with homework, about the way grief changes shape but never leaves, about how being needed can save you. He learned about the loneliness of rooms filled with people, about the way power can isolate, about the fear of being seen without polish. They met in the afternoons when the sun leaned just enough to make the city kind. The challenge came the way challenges do, dressed as opportunity. The print shop faced closure, rent rising like water against a door. Armin stayed late, ran numbers, pretended courage. Zara wrestled with a different flood, a board that wanted bloodless growth and stories without mess. Their worlds brushed against each other until brushing was no longer enough. When Zara suggested a partnership, a campaign to save local shops, it felt like standing at the river again, the edge slick with possibility and fear. She invited him to her office one afternoon, the glass catching the sky. It was then, standing in a space that amplified every breath, that the words slipped out of her in a way that surprised them both. "Will you stay if I undress?" the CEO asked in a whisper meant for courage, not seduction, the sentence heavy with metaphor and risk. She meant the armor, the certainty, the identity that kept her safe. She meant the public self she was tired of wearing. Armin did not flinch. He looked at the city beyond the glass and thought of rivers and jackets and the way daylight reveals everything. He said he would stay for honesty, not spectacle, for effort, not exposure. What followed was not a fall but a careful crossing. Zara stepped into vulnerability with the awkwardness of someone learning a new language. She told the board the truth about community and long games. She invested in people instead of headlines. Armin let help in, not as rescue but as partnership. The campaign worked because it was real, because people recognize daylight when it stands still long enough to be seen. The shop stayed open. The city breathed. Their relationship grew in the spaces between, in lunches shared on benches and weekends spent teaching Sammy to skip stones where the river ran tame. Zara learned how to laugh without measuring the sound. Armin learned how to ask without apology. They did not save each other, they stood together while the water passed. There were setbacks, nights when fear woke them, mornings when courage felt thin. But daylight returned, patient as ever. Near the end of summer, they went back to the river, the sun high and forgiving. Zara stood at the bank and watched the current with respect. Armin stood beside her, a steady presence that asked nothing. She took off her shoes and rolled her trousers, not to enter the water but to feel the air on her skin, to remember that survival is a daily choice. The river flowed on, unconcerned, as rivers do. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that kindness can be quiet and courage can look like staying, please engage with this video, because stories live longer when they are held by many hands. And just before the ending, a special request from us at Shadowverse. Comment with the word, "Stay," if you believe that showing up can change a life. They left the river as they had arrived that first day, in daylight, with the city humming around them. The hook of fear had loosened its grip. The question had been answered not with spectacle but with presence. And somewhere between the rush of water and the steadiness of hands, two lives had learned how to stand where the current could not take them.